My eyes shot open suddenly, and I realized I'd fallen asleep in my towel on top of my bed after my bath. I must have been exhausted, I thought, as I looked over at my digital alarm clock, and it was only 4:52 in the morning. I could hear music playing somewhere off in the distance. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but then I remembered that I had forgotten to turn off the radio after Hannah left. I walked out of my bedroom and into the living area. Shit, I must have left this on all night, I thought as I pressed the power button on the speaker. I walked into the kitchen and opened the freezer. I saw a pint of Reese's ice cream that my fiancé tried to hide from me in the back, behind a bag of frozen vegetables. I stood there for a second and debated on whether or not I should scoop out a mouthful with my fingers just to be spiteful, but refrained. Instead, I enjoyed a tall glass of ice water, and I drank it so fast that I got a brain freeze. I pulled open the fridge and snatched a piece of pizza from the box. I walked out of the kitchen to check the front door while eating the cold slice. All the locks on the front door were in place, so I turned on the security alarm. Once I put in the code, it beeped once to tell me it was working. It beeped louder this time than I remembered and startled me, but I felt relieved knowing it was now activated. I got halfway to my baby boy's room before I remembered I was alone in the house tonight. I loathe being alone in my house. When I was walking back to my room, my poor pinky toe collided with something solid, and I yelped. Great, I just broke my damn toe. I bent backwards to flip on the light and examine it. I grabbed my throbbing appendage, and it was already starting to bruise. I bent it a little to see if it was broken. Luckily, it wasn't. When I saw that I kicked the box, that I told Hannah that I would put away later, I was mad at myself for leaving it where it could be kicked by sleepy feet. Well, it is later. I picked up the heavy box of favors and walked toward the garage. When I opened the door, the hot, musty air hit my face like a baseball bat. Why is it so damn hot in here? It was dimly lit, signaling a bulb needed changing overhead. The recycled air was stale, and the smell from the hot garbage cans caused me to plug my nose. I pushed past the pool table to where I stored everything. I walked through slowly, examining the black permanent marker labeling on each one. I could see from where I stood most of them were labeled books. I know I am an avid reader, but every one of these flipping boxes cannot be filled with books. I pulled over a chair and stood on it to grab the top box and bring it down to the floor. It was heavier than I had anticipated, so I knew that it contained books. I grabbed down 2 more boxes, hoping I would find stuff I could throw away. To my surprise, the first box I opened held my first pair of scrubs. They were charcoal gray and not so gently used. I hugged them tightly, and they smelled faintly of fabric softener. The feel of the material initiated the memory of my first day of nursing school. The other boxes I inspected were loaded to the brim with books. Fiction novels, textbooks from college, and old cookbooks my grandmother had given me through the years. I loved reading. The feel of a paperback in my hand always seemed to provide comfort. The only reason I did not have a book that I had read was if someone borrowed it and forgot to give it back. I decided to try my luck and open 1 more box, but to my dismay, it was just another box full of books that I could not bring myself to toss out. I planned on building a giant bookshelf the length of the wall in my office, but it was currently serving as a playroom. I sat down on the floor, crossed my legs, and pulled out a couple of the ones that were sitting on top. As I looked at the cover pages, I remembered reading them all. I dug both hands into the box and pulled out several of my favorites. I had a broad range of stories I had collected over the years and didn't prefer any specific genre. I just loved a good story. I just sat there and imagined what it would be like to be an author. How cool would it be to make up a story using only your imagination? I was about to drop the books back in when something caught my eye. It was an old spiral notebook that I remember picking out in high school. I finagled the books that I was already holding into one arm and reached down to pull it out. I vividly remembered going to the store with my mother and picking it from hundreds of others. It was supposed to be a book that I could write down all my essential high school information I hadn't memorized yet. Somehow it converged into a journal type of deal. I held it close and took a deep breath. I was seriously nervous to open it. A smile bordered my mouth when I opened it and read the name on the first page aloud. Randy Milton. I remembered Randy with great affection. He was technically my first boyfriend, but being that I was only 15 at the time, we never did much more than hold hands. I remember the exact day I met Randy for the first time. It was summer. Some of the neighborhood kids and I were spending time together in front of my house as we did most days. Those who were not part of the active game of horse were sitting with me on my street's green generator. That's when we saw Randy. By we, I mean all the girls that were outside noticed him at the same time. He and his dad were on their driveway having a push-up battle amongst themselves. I knew that a family had recently moved into the corner house through street gossip, but I had yet to see anyone. I decided the polite thing to do was to go over and introduce myself. Randy's dad had just walked inside, but Randy noticed me approaching and smiled as he wiped sweat from his face with the shirt he had taken off earlier. He was so cute and had tan skin for a white boy. He was the most muscular teenager I had ever seen, like Butch from the movie The Little Giants. He had breathtaking sky blue eyes and a mouthful of braces. The sweet memories of our childhood romance came flooding back. Randy would walk down to my house every time he visited his dad, which was conveniently only 5 doors down. We would just sit in front of my house or on my porch and talk. Sometimes we would walk around the neighborhood together. I could not believe out of all the girls that lived on this street, Randy picked me. I knew I was not the prettiest of them all, and I definitely had the tomboy factor playing against me, but I liked to think that he appreciated it. Randy was the star wrestling champ at his high school, so I knew all of the preppy cheerleader girls threw themselves at him. He was the first boy that ever showed me any real attention, and I was eating that shit up like a fat kid at a buffet. Randy was 2 grades above me, but he was the only boy that I can remember who never tried to get me out of my underwear. There were plenty of opportunities for us to fool around, especially when I was at his dad's house. Every time I was there, it seemed like no one else was ever home. I remembered playing football one afternoon with some neighborhood friends when my mom drove up. She came to tell me that Randy had gone to the house looking for me. She also tried to persuade me to come home and take a shower, but I just continued to play until I saw him walking up to the field. He was dressed up, wearing pressed jeans, a fitted button-up, and brown cowboy boots. When he came up to me, he pulled the biggest sunflowers I had ever seen from behind his back. From that time on, he brought me sunflowers every weekend that he came to visit his dad. I smiled to myself, recalling this sweet memory. One weekend, only a few months after they moved in, I noticed his dad was moving out. I just knew deep down that I would not be seeing Randy anymore. My smile faded, remembering how I felt when Randy never came back to my neighborhood. I hesitated to flip to the next page, knowing that all these uncharted feelings of failed relationships were going to ruin my whole bride-to-be mood, so I slapped the notebook shut. When I went to set the spiral notebook back in the box, I saw some infant items. Underneath a row of books were old onesies, teething rings, and baby toys. Why is the baby book in here? I shook the dust off and opened it up. That is when the old crumbled up. Then re-flattened death certificate fell on my lap. I picked it up and just held it for a while. When someone you love dies, years can go by without thinking of them, and in an instant, something happens. Something tiny and irrelevant, but it sparks a microscopic neuron in your brain, and you recall all those memories that you suppressed in order to function. They erupt suddenly and without warning, like a volcano, and spew everything you can remember of that person. All the memories, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Like there is nothing to filter through them. They just sit in the back of your eyes, waiting for the minute you close them, to replay clips of your past, no matter how happy, sad, or cruel it can be. Memories of people you have lost, however comforting at first, somehow manage to leave a lingering metallic taste.
Due to explicit language and sexual content, I cannot post the entire recording on TikTok. To hear the whole audiobook for free, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Gypsy Heritage Publications.